Welcome to my Shining a Light On series, as today we will be shining a light on video game pacing. Well, sort of. Normally when people think of video game pacing, they think of gameplay pacing or story pacing, but in this case I do not mean either of those, but another definition entirely. What I mean by is pacing as in walking back and forth or just mindlessly moving, but in a video game. Most people have paced around in some form in the real world, even if not fully conscious of it. A common one is just pacing around while having a conversation on the phone. Pacing in real life is linked to a few things like just killing time, anxiety, stress, cognitive processing, and perhaps even some mental illnesses. Now, does pacing in video games have the same links to normal pacing? I cannot fully say for certain, but I would at least say there is a small overlap at the very least. So, how does one pacing around in real life relate to pacing around in a video game? Well, this all started as a thought of mine when I saw a meme about Grand Theft Auto 5. On screen is the said meme. There are a few variations of it, but most are similar to this one. Now, this is about driving. However, it has a similar idea to pacing, basically just mindlessly doing an activity that is just going somewhere and moving. To me, this really resonated with me, as I remember doing the same exact thing when Grand Theft Auto 5 came out. You see, I actually do this sort of behavior quite often in video games, however I tend to do it in various forms. In Final Fantasy XIV, I would pace up and down boss arenas while people discussed tactics for the fight, as I was just killing time until they were done talking. I would pace in our housing ward, I would pace in random spots on the map, I would pace just about anywhere. I recently watched an old video of my friends and I playing Minecraft, and we were all just pacing around and just talking while not really doing much in the game. Now, do I have some undiagnosed mental disorder? Maybe. I don't really know, but I have seen others do this as well, so it's clearly a somewhat common activity. Streamers are another example, as they will sometimes just be pacing around in a game like Final Fantasy XIV or World of Warcraft or any other game as they converse with their chat. Clearly, they are more focused on their chat, but like myself, they feel the need to move around in the virtual space, so oftentimes you will catch them just walking and jumping around mindlessly. I tend to do this a lot, as when I was capturing footage for my Second Life video, I was catching myself doing it there as well. So, I like to call this virtual pacing, since, well, you are virtually pacing around. Sometimes it's less of a pace and more of just a drive or a walk around the map in a game though. The simple way I would define virtual pacing is mindlessly moving in some shape or form in a video game with no major goal. I tried looking up videos on this topic, and while I did find some that were somewhat relevant, but most I found were discussions on walking in video games. I didn't really find much on what it exactly meant, but I do wonder how good YouTube search is these days. However, there is a video by Odd Orange which highlights this topic a little bit, but not so much in the pacing aspect. It's a great watch though, I will link it down below in the description. In the video, they mention it's therapeutic just to walk around in video games, and I fully agree with them. Going for a walk in real life is nice, but for some people, doing just that can be a struggle for whatever reason, so they can just do it virtually. Now sometimes when I pace around in a game, I do just walk, but generally I just jump around and run when I virtually pace. Oftentimes when I see myself through another person's perspective, I do look a bit silly, but I never really care too much. However, I feel it's also therapeutic to me, but maybe in a different sense than just walking in a video game. When I virtually pace, most of the time I'm just thinking about something, and virtually pacing helps me focus on my thoughts more than just sitting there would. Honestly, when people see me pacing around in a video game, I often get messages asking if I'm alright or what I am doing. However, sometimes people even join in. It's always kind of cute and wholesome when it happens. Recently in these past couple years, I met a kindred soul that virtually paces as well, and she says she's always been virtually pacing as long as she can remember. The thing is, she is basically wheelchair bound, so virtually pacing is the best way she can mimic pacing in real life. Now, is every game suitable for virtual pacing? No, I would even say most are not. Games where I'd catch myself virtually pacing were mostly MMOs, but I would catch myself doing it in Red Dead Redemption or Grand Theft Auto or even Cyberpunk. Each of these games have pretty big worlds or areas just to run around and jump in. However, Final Fantasy XIV's world is kind of closed off by zones. I would say most of my virtual pacing in Final Fantasy XIV is just in small areas, which kinda separates it from the other games. However, I would not virtually pace around in Silent Hill for an example, which I actually wanted to test this theory out, that it would not be a game that I would pace around in. You see, something I pace around in is VR chat, and in VR chat someone has built the map of Silent Hill 2, so I wanted to see if I'd pace around in it. I in fact did catch myself jumping and running around, ending up just thinking about some stuff on my mind a little and caught myself just hopping around virtually pacing. However, I did not pace around when I was playing the actual Silent Hill 2. So why is it like this? Well, the biggest and most obvious answer was the enemies. They broke the flow of movement, and honestly, I can safely say that is a huge aspect of it for me, which made me not want to pace around in the game. Silent Hill 2's combat is clunky and slow, so it broke up the momentum. In other games like Cyberpunk 2077 and Red Dead Redemption 2, when I was forced to do combat, it did break the momentum a little. However, it never fully outright killed the momentum, as once the quick combat was done, I was back onto my virtual pacing. I sometimes would just run past the enemies and ignore them to keep my stride. So clearly, combat is not the full reason. Another reason is just how the movement feels. Going back to Silent Hill 2, the movement is fine, but the game is not really designed around that. Movement is important in video games, and it's one a lot of people don't give that much thought to. Every game has a different base speed, sprinting speed, turning speed, and so forth. Platformers also add a whole other aspect to this as well. Mario 64 is a game I can play and just turn my brain off and just bounce around. Now, with Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead Redemption, I rarely virtually paced around while I was on foot, as I was either in a car or on a horse just driving around, which is an entirely different set of movements. The mechanics of the vehicles feel good and there is speed to them, while walking in those games, less so. So what makes a game suitable for virtual pacing? This is, of course, only my opinion. However, I think a game where there's low threat to no threat and solid movement of some kind is key for it. Multiplayer adds to it as well, I would think, as I know I have had several conversations with people online where we were just running around someplace virtually. Multiplayer is not needed, but oftentimes when I see people pacing around in video games, it's while they are talking to someone, be a friend or just a stream chat. Now, not all multiplayer games are fit to pace in. If you did this in the middle of a Battlefield match, you'd just be throwing the match. There are games where all you do, or mostly do, is walk, and oftentimes these are not the best for virtual pacing, ironically enough. Death Stranding is a game where it has all the different types of movements from vehicles to just walking, but it's not one I ever caught myself mindlessly pacing around in. I do feel like Death Stranding fits more with the video I mentioned earlier as a therapeutic walk. There are games that are considered to be walking simulators, to where most of what you do is, well, walk. I recently played Still Wakes the Deep, and it's a game I never caught myself virtually pacing around in, and many call it a walking simulator. Other walking simulators were the same to me, even when they were not really a horror game. When I played Journey for an example, my goal was just to complete the journey. I would explore, of course, looking for things, but I never caught myself idly pacing around. What I am getting at is a good chunk of walking-based games, you tend to have a goal, and oftentimes when you are virtually pacing, you have no goal at the moment. When I was younger, the one game I played to death was Tony Hawk Underground. I would catch myself spending hours just casually running around the map doing tricks with no goal at all. Now, is this considered virtual pacing? I would say so, but even if it doesn't fully fit the virtual pacing definition, it's something at least adjacent to the concept. I would skate for hours on end, maybe switching the map every once in a while. Coming home from school just stressed about something and just skating around a bit before dinner. I know, I catch myself virtually pacing alone, and I think if a person's just stressed out or just thinking about things in general, I think it's fairly normal behavior to just pace around. Maybe I am wrong and I am just some giant weirdo, but I really do believe others are like this since I have seen it done many times. So let's go back to what makes a game suitable for virtual pacing. First, low threat or no threat at all. Second, solid movement that is at the very least not clunky. Third, either a low casual goal or no goal at all. Multiplayer can be a plus, and I would even say the locale in the games help as well. Having a change of scenery is often a plus, and in games you can be in a city one moment and then some forest the next. There's this game called Slow Roads. All you do in it is drive around. I made a YouTube short of Slow Roads telling more about its details if you want more info. The current footage that is playing is actually Slow Roads. I will leave a link in the description down below as you can just play it in your browser. However, there is no goal in this game as all you do is just drive. Now I admit, this is not really pacing by the normal definition as it's just going for a drive, but again, similar logic of just going around with little thought in a virtual space. This simple game is just something I catch myself playing sometimes when I have to take phone calls as it's just very relaxing. Most games are rarely like this though, as one can even consider this barely even a game. However, when I play Slow Roads, it has a drastically different feeling than if I was to pace around in Mario 64. So why is that? Well, I'm going to get into a little psychology right now. You see, when I was recently playing Metro Gravity, I noticed that her steps were in the rhythm of the music. I will shut up for a moment so you can listen for yourself. This made me consider the rhythmic nature of pacing. The thing is, humans are rhythmic in several ways, and in some ways we are completely unaware of. Of course, our brain loves music, and that tickles the rhythmic aspects of our brain. However, what about rocking back and forth, tapping your foot, or pacing? All of these can be rhythmic activities that we do and we are not even cognizant of. Another aspect of rhythmic behavior is just interacting with familiar things regularly, be it a book, a movie, or even a video game. Some people have a comfort show they watch, as The Office is a common one I hear of. So what I am getting at is oftentimes a person will have an activity they do regularly like a rhythm. So Mario 64 is a game I have played for decades now, so I would say I know it fairly well and can be considered a comfort game for me. I used to casually speedrun it in the past when I was bored. So what I am getting at is that maybe another aspect that can be attached as a reason for virtual pacing, and it's a pretty simple one. It's just a game that you are familiar with. Having the rhythm to do triple jumps in Mario 64 can hit the dopamine switch inside my head, even though it's a fairly simple thing to do. When I am virtually pacing around, it gives a very similar feeling, as it's scratching the rhythmic portion of my brain. This is only a theory of mine, of course, but I do believe virtual pacing is rhythmic. There could be other factors, like virtually pacing helping with short attention spans, but I feel like that would depend on the person. So, I listed some games already that I virtually pace around in, but are there others? Of course there are, and I will list a few that I have caught myself virtually pacing around in. Counter-Strike being one, as I would even say surf maps could fall into this category of virtual pacing to a degree. Elden Ring being an odd one, but I would catch myself running around some of the more safe areas just mindlessly, or when I was powerful enough I would just mindlessly kill enemies. Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain was a game I would catch myself just wandering around Mother Base for no real reason. Another indie game, Pseudo Regalia, was one I would catch myself casually just jumping around doing tricks. Lastly, a game I virtually pace around in would be Bomb Rush Cyberpunk. Again, just like with the Tony Hawk games, pacing might not be the best term, but I feel it fits. I could list much more, but I feel like this is enough. So, have you ever caught yourself doing anything like this? If so, please comment down below, as I would love to see how other people view this and share the video games that they have virtually paced around in. If this seems a little odd, well, it kinda is, I admit. I have been aware of this behavior of mine for several years at this point. Do I think this is an issue? Nah, not really. It's just a little quirk that I catch myself and others doing sometimes. It helps me relax and think on things, and when I am talking with friends, it's a good background activity. Psychology in video games is an aspect we never really consider too much, as video games have become a vast form of media. Perhaps I will do another video on psychology of video games in the future, since I find topics like this fascinating. My next video will be a different one, and that is, well, an experiment. Well, this is the end of the video, so best wishes for everyone till next time and take care.